Her name wasn't in any commendation bulletin. There were no ceremonies, no framed photographs in the hallway. Just a desk near a window that looked out onto a concrete courtyard. A cup of coffee that went cold faster than she could drink it, and a stack of reports nobody else wanted to read. But before we talk about the desk, we need to talk about what came before it.
Diana Mercer was born in Norfolk, Virginia, 18 blocks from the naval base that would one day become her home. Her father was a chief machinist's mate in the Navy. He spent the first 8 years of her life underway. When he came back, he smelled like engine oil and salt water. She thought that was the best smell in the world. Her mother was a nurse. She worked double shifts during the months her father was gone. Never complained, not once. Diana learned what purposeful silence looked like long before any military training ever taught it to her.
At 17, she was the only girl in her class to finish the voluntary NJROTC field orientation without dropping out on the second day of marching in the rain. The instructor, a retired master chief with 40 years of service, looked at her after the drill and said, "You're not here to prove anything to me, are you?" She answered, "No, Master Chief. I'm here because this is where I want to be." He didn't say anything else, but she saw the corner of his mouth move. At 18, she signed the papers, not because she needed to get out of Norfolk, not because she had no options. She signed because the sea was in her blood, the same way salt is in the ocean, not something added, something that was always there. Recruit Training Command, Great Lakes, Illinois. Cold, loud, exactly what she expected. She wasn't the fastest, she wasn't the strongest, but she was the most consistent. Every morning before the first call, she was already up. Not to impress anyone, sleeping in just felt like a waste of time that could be used. Her company commander, a petty officer first class with 3 tours in the Persian Gulf, pulled her aside in the second week. "Mercer, what are you trying to do?" "Nothing, petty officer." "Then why are you up before everyone else?" Diana stood straight, eyes forward. "Because the day starts before the call, petty officer. The enemy doesn't wait for the alarm." A long silence. Dismissed. Diana walked back to the formation, but something had shifted. The petty officer first class started watching her differently, not as a problem, as a potential.
The Navy doesn't have a single path for women to reach Naval Special Warfare. For decades, the doors were closed, not because of lack of ability, because of policy, because of tradition, because of fear of what didn't fit the mold. Diana knew that, so she didn't try to walk through the front door. She built her own reputation, brick by brick, one posting at a time, until Naval Special Warfare support activity had no way to ignore her file. First tour, Intelligence Specialist, Bahrain, 2009. She was 23 years old. The heat there was different from Norfolk heat. Heavier, drier, like the air had been compressed and forgotten. She worked 12-hour shifts inside the skiff, the sensitive, compartmented information facility, analyzing movement patterns on maritime routes crossing the Strait of Hormuz. One day, she identified an anomaly.
A dhow, a traditional Arabic vessel, appearing at the same coordinates at 0217 3 times a week. No registered cargo, no declared destination, always on moonless nights. She brought the analysis to her LPO. Could be fishing. At 0200, 3 times a week, same position, 0 route variation? Her LPO looked at her. What are you suggesting, Mercer? I'm suggesting it's worth an intercept, Petty Officer. He took the report up the chain. The intercept happened a week later. The dhow was carrying IED components bound for a coastal route used by Allied convoys. Diana Mercer was 23 years old, and she had just saved lives she would never know existed. She received no public commendation. Her work was classified. But 3 weeks later, a transfer order appeared in her inbox. Naval Special Warfare Command, Coronado, California. At Coronado, she learned that Naval Special Warfare was not about brute force. It was about information, precision, timing. She trained alongside SEALs who outweighed her by 80 pounds and had half her patience with data. They knew it. The commander overseeing the intelligence support unit called her in during the first month. Mercer, you served in the Gulf? Yes, sir. Bahrain, 2009 to 2011. I know. I read your file 3 times. She didn't respond. She waited. You identified a pattern 3 senior analysts missed. Yes, sir. Why? What did you see that they didn't? Diana thought for a moment. They were looking for what they expected to find, sir. I was looking for what shouldn't have been there. The commander was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Welcome to NSW."
The 11 years that followed were written in places that don't appear on civilian maps. 3 deployments, 2 classified operations that still exist only in files with restricted access. She couldn't talk about them. Not with family, not with friends, sometimes barely with herself. First deployment, Eastern Mediterranean, 2013. The mission was intelligence support for VBSS operations, visit, board, search, and seizure on weapons trafficking routes cutting through the sea between the Libyan coast and southern Europe. Diana was stationed on a support vessel. But one night, the forward team's intelligence operator was medivated for appendicitis. The team's commander called her. "Mercer, have you done VBSS before?" "Training only, sir, never operational." "This isn't the ideal time for a first." "No, sir." Silence. "But you know the target better than anyone on this vessel." "Yes, sir." He looked at her for 3 full seconds. "You go as an observer. You stay at the rear of the element. You do not engage unless there is no alternative. If anything goes wrong, you are the first one out." "Understood, sir." The operation lasted 42 minutes. They located 340 kilos of explosive material bound for an active group in North Africa. Diana held the position she was assigned. She didn't fire a single shot. But when the team moved toward the wrong compartment, and she recognized from the deck plans she had memorized that the actual target was 2 levels below,
She said one word on the radio. "Below." The lead operator stopped, looked at her. She pointed to the deck. They found the compartment. They found the material. Mission complete. In the debrief, the commander said only, "Good work, Mercer." 4 words. She held on to every one of them. The second deployment was where everything changed. 2019, a location she cannot name. A valley that appeared on maps as coordinates, but in reality was a kill funnel for any team that entered from the north. She knew this because she had studied that terrain for 8 months before the operation. And she knew it because she had been there once before on a reconnaissance mission that almost didn't have a return. On that day in 2019, her 4-operator team entered from the north. 2 support groups went in from the east and west. When contact was made, east and west were cut off. But her team, by a decision she had made 4 hours prior, based on a wind reading and the shadow position in the valley, had taken an 18-minute detour through the south. They were the only ones who came out without casualties. She never spoke about it publicly, but the report was on file. And years later, when an admiral dropped a classified folder on her desk, those coordinates were there. The injury came on the 3rd deployment, not in a dramatic firefight, not in a rooftop rescue. A fall on a metal ladder on a vessel in heavy seas. 2 spinal discs, surgery, rehabilitation, 6 months. And then the desk. The system didn't know what to do with her. She no longer fit the standard operational categories. Not young enough for full requalification, not old enough to retire. So they gave her an administrative role in a gray 2-story building at Naval Station Little Creek, Virginia. NSW Group 2, Strategic Planning. In practice, a desk, reports, meetings that went nowhere, and men with fewer missions than she had, who called her the note-taker. She heard it. She didn't react. She kept showing up. Every morning, coffee in hand, posture correct, like that desk was the deck of a ship, and she still had a job to do. 3 months after the transfer, a rear admiral walked into the room. 2 stars. A man she had never met in person, but whose name she knew very well. He dropped a classified folder on her desk without breaking stride. "Summarize this, sweetheart." She didn't look up immediately. She finished the sentence she was writing, capped her pen, opened the folder. She read every page, once. Then she closed it, and she walked to his office without knocking. "Sir." He looked up from his papers with an expression that made clear he hadn't expected to be interrupted. "Captain Mercer, I asked for a summary, not a visit. With respect, sir, this briefing cannot be summarized because this mission is going to fail." The rear admiral leaned back in his chair. The room went very quiet. "Go on." "The insertion is planned for first light. In that sector, that puts the element exposed for a 4-minute window before reaching cover. The briefing assumes 2 minutes based on 2021 data. But the terrain has changed. There was a landslide in the northern quadrant in 2022. The shadow no longer covers the eastern corridor at that time of day." "And how do you know that?" Diana put her finger on the map on his desk. "Because I was in that valley, sir, in 2019, with my team. We were the only ones who came back because I changed the route 4 hours before go time. I used the southern corridor, here." Her finger stopped on a specific point. "This corridor is still clean. Favorable wind from 0130. Vegetation cover to within 400 meters of the objective. And here," she touched another point, "there is a passage that doesn't appear on any civilian map, but my team used it for exfil in 2019. It cut our exposure from 8 minutes to 90 seconds. The rear admiral looked at the map. Then he looked at her. "How many people know about that passage?" "4, sir, and one of them is in this room." Silence. He picked up the phone.
The mission was replanned in 18 hours. She wasn't consulted again. She wasn't invited to the final briefing. She wasn't told the go time. She went back to her desk and kept reading reports. 3 days later, at 0640 in the morning, she was in the break room getting her second coffee when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Footsteps she recognized, not by sound, by rhythm. The rhythm of steps that pause once before entering a room, the pace of someone deciding what to say. The rear admiral walked into the break room. He was in his service dress blue, full uniform, medals in line. He stopped 2 meters from her, and then he did something that no one in that building had seen a flag officer do in years. He raised his right hand, slowly, deliberately, a full salute. Diana set down her coffee. She raised her hand. She returned it. 12 operators went in, Captain. 12 came home. She said nothing. "I owe you an apology." Diana looked at him calmly. "You don't owe me anything, sir." "I do." "Then you owe it to the 12 who came home, not to me." The rear admiral was quiet for a moment. "You spent 3 months at that desk being ignored by people who don't come close to half of what you've been through." "Yes, sir." "Why didn't you say something sooner?" Diana picked up her coffee. She looked out the window at the concrete courtyard. "Because it wasn't my place to say anything, sir, until it was." More silence. Then he said, "There's a meeting on Monday. Long-range operational planning, Indo-Pacific Theater." "Yes, sir. I want you at the table, not as the note-taker." She turned to him. "Understood, sir." The rear admiral turned to leave. He stopped at the door. "One thing, Captain." "Sir?" "How did you know about the landslide, about the shadow? The field data wasn't in the briefing." Diana held her cup with both hands. "It wasn't, sir, but it was in the environmental assessment from March 2022 that was left open because nobody signed the follow-up." "You read the environmental assessment?" "I read all the reports, sir. It's what I do at that desk."
Diana Mercer walked back to the window. Outside, 2 young ensigns crossed the courtyard with quick steps and serious faces. probably heading to the first important briefing of their careers. She thought about herself at 18, signing the papers in Norfolk. She thought about her father, smelling like engine oil and salt water, about her mother, who never complained, about the master chief who didn't say a word but let the corner of his mouth move. She thought about the 4 people who knew about the passage in the valley, and about how 3 of them still slept every night because someone had looked at a map and seen what shouldn't have been there. She had no ceremony, no framed photograph in the hallway. She had a desk near a window and reports nobody wanted to read. But on that Monday, she walked into a room with admirals and commanders and put her finger on a map with the same calm as someone who knows every inch of the terrain, because she had been there. And when the most senior officer in the room asked for her opinion on the insertion route, she didn't hesitate. Not because she wanted to prove something, but because 12 operators were going into that valley, and she knew a passage that cut their exposure from 8 minutes to 90 seconds, and that was the only reason that mattered. Her name wasn't in any commendation bulletin, but it was in the only place she ever wanted it to be, in the briefing, on the map, and in the memory of 12 men who made it home.